80 years ago today, The Three Railway Engines was first published. From the Reverend Wilbert Awdry telling his son bedtime stories about talking steam engines when he was sick with measles, to his wife nagging him to get the stories published, to finding a willing publisher, The Three Railway Engines was published on the 12th of May 1945, which became the first in a long series of books known as the Railway series. I have had all of Wilbert's books for a few years now, and have recently collected Christopher's books, so now is a better time than ever to show you all my collection. I keep my Railway series books underneath this really battered print of a Thomas poster, which is actually the billboard from series 12. But we're not here to talk about the TV series, we're here to talk about the books that inspired the TV series. Starting with Wilbert's books, which I have in this box set here, containing the 2002 reprints of all of them. So let's get into it. The first one is of course The Three Railway Engines, which never originally used to look like this. It was originally illustrated by William Middleton, who very poorly illustrated the book. The new illustrations still have flaws, but look so much better with C. Reginald Dalby's illustrations. The second book is Thomas the Tank Engine, which is definitely the most famous book in the whole series. This was the first appearance of Thomas. Even though every anniversary is celebrated at, say, 80 years of Thomas, even though it had absolutely nothing to do with the first book. However, Thomas had existed since Christmas Day 1942, when Christopher received a toy tank engine which he named Thomas, who was turned into Me Too by Reginald Payne, the original illustrator of this book. His illustrations were much better than Middleton's, however, Dalby also re-illustrated this book for consistency. The third book is James the Red Engine, first published in 1948. This was the first book to be illustrated by C. Reginald Dalby, and it really shows. He did this book before illustrating the other two books. The fourth book is Tank Engine Thomas Again from 1949. I do really like these branch line stories, where throughout all of them you can really see the evolution of Thomas's branch line. Next up is Troublesome Engines from 1950, and after that, Henry the Green Engine from 1951. Now, some of you may know that this book was actually changed, because originally it contained a racial slur, and the line has since been changed. It was changed in the early 70s. This is also the only book in the Railway series to have 5 stories instead of the usual 4. Book 7 is Toby the Tram Engine from 1952, and Book 8 is Gordon the Big Engine from 1953. Book 9 is Edward the Blue Engine from 1954. Book 10, Four Little Engines from 1955, sees the introduction of the Skarloey Railway. And the 11th book, Percy the Small Engine from 1956, was the final book to be illustrated by C. Reginald Dalby. Starting from Book 12, The 8 Famous Engines, published in 1957, John T. Kenny started illustrating. Something that I only noticed recently about the illustrations is that they mature as the series goes on. At the start of the series, they're quite cartoony, which matches the light tone of the series, and as the series matures, so does the illustration. And by the end of Wilbert's run, they look like paintings. And going into Christopher's books, which took a step back in writing, so did the illustrations. Fun fact, Wilbert actually considered ending the series with Book 12, but thankfully he didn't. The 13th book was Duck and the Diesel Engine from 1958, which is one of my all-time favourites. Book 14 is the second Skarloey Railway book, being The Little Old Engine from 1959. The 15th book was The Twin Engines from 1960. Book 16 was Branch Line Engines from 1961. Book 17 was the third Skarloey Railway book, Gallant Old Engine from 1962, which was the last book to be illustrated by John T. Kenny, and starting with 1963's Stepney the Bluebell Engine, Gunvor and Peter Edwards started illustrating the books. This book is another one of my favourites. Book 19 is Mountain Engines from 1964. This book was a bit strange. It really should have had a follow-up book, but I still quite like it. I had a massive Coldy phase at one point, I remember. Book number 20 is another one of my all-time favourites, being Very Old Engines from 1965. Look at its cool, slightly different font style there. I really wish we got more books written in this style, with a character telling their backstory. The 21st book was Mainline Engines from 1966, and the 22nd book was Small Railway Engines from 1967, which introduced the miniature railway. Moving on to another one of my all-time favourites, book 23, Enterprising Engines from 1968. Book 24 was Oliver the Western Engine from 1969. And next up is my all-time favourite book in the Railway series, that one being Duke the Lost Engine from 1970. Awdry did actually intend for this one to be the finale, and it would have made such a great finale. But the publishers urged him to write one more, and he did so too. He published the 26th and final book, Tramway Engines, in 1972. Wilbert Awdry was well and truly out of ideas at this point, and the Railway series went on hiatus until his son Christopher took over. Christopher's books aren't included in any box sets, and can be very rare. The first four, being books 27 to 30, aren't too hard, the middle ones vary, and the last few are pretty much impossible to get, but we'll get onto those. Christopher's first book, number 27, Really Useful Engines, was first published in 1983. This is the 1987 reprint. Clive Spong is now illustrator, and in this book the illustrations are very questionable. Book 28, James and the Diesel Engines, was first published in 1984. This is again the 1987 reprint. Clive Spong really changed his style here for the illustrations. I was very surprised when I found out that these illustrations were done by the same person that did the last book. Next up is book number 29, Great Little Engines, which was first published in 1985. This is the 1991 reprint. And this book is actually a signed copy. It seems World of Books doesn't care whether a book is signed or not. You just need to get really lucky like I did. So, Joe, whoever you are, thank you. Next up is book 30, More About Thomas the Tank Engine, first published in 1986. This is yet again the 1987 reprint. This book was written for the TV crew because in Series 1 they pretty much ran out of Thomas stories to adapt, so they needed some more for Series 2, so this is why this book exists. My copy is quite delicate. You have to be quite careful with these older KW ones. Book 31, Gordon the High-Speed Engine, was first published in 1987. It says reprinted 1991, 1993 on the inside, so I guess it's just a 1993 reprint of the 1991 reprint. Book 33, Toby Trucks and Trouble, was first published in 1988. This is the 1989 reprint. Fun fact, this book broke the tradition of the word engine or engines being in the title of every book. Book 33, Thomas and the Twins. This was first published in 1989. This edition says reprinted 1993 twice, 1995, so this seems to be the 1995 reprint of the 1993 reprint. You can tell this is a new edition because it has the white on the back, instead of just the words on some of the earlier ones. Next up is book 34, Jock the New Engine, which was first published in 1990. This is the 1993 reprint. Next up is one of my favourite of Christopher's books, book 35, Thomas and the Great Railway Show, first published in 1991. This is actually an original copy. My copy does have some sun fading on the side, but that's okay. The next book is the sequel to that book, being Thomas Comes Home, which was first published in 1992. This is again an original copy. The next book is book number 37, Henry and the Express, first published in 1993. This is yet again an original copy. Now, these last few books are like rare. Next up is book 38, Wilbert the Forest Engine, first published in 1994. This is the 1995 reprint. Next up is book 39, Thomas and the Fat Controller's Engines. Please don't comment fake, let me just explain my overly dramatic story with this. This book is like impossible tier rare. When it does turn up on eBay, which is very, very rare, it's usually about £40 to £45. I tried to get it from my library to print it out, which is what I did with the last two books. We'll get onto those in just a moment. However, the library couldn't find the book because someone probably pinched it. And then I found it for not too much on a site called Biblio, however, they couldn't find it either. So I had to print it out somewhere online. I found a scan on Internet Archive. they block you from printing it, so I screenshotted all of the pages and had to print them all out. It was just really trial and error to get the sizing right. I eventually got there and started printing, however I ran out of ink halfway through, so I had to wait another week to get some more, and when that was done I had to sort out the cover, which doesn't fit perfectly, but it's the best me and my mum could do. So here it is. This book was first published in 1995. This is a 2025 home print of the 2007 reprint, with the spine of the original. Yeah, this is the best I can do. Please don't comment fake. There was a lot of effort going into that. Here is book 40, New Little Engine, first published in 1996, and this is once again an original copy. I again have a story about this book. This one is very rare. At the moment, it's averaging about £40 on eBay. World of Books had a listing on their eBay for £99.99p. I put it on my watch list just in case they reduced it or something happened, and one morning I got an email saying the price had been reduced from £99.99 to £7.99, and there was only one left, so I thought I'm having that. And when it arrived, it was in literally perfect condition. For some reason on the spine of the book, the name Christopher Awdry is pixelated. Book 41, Thomas and Victoria. This is one that I got from my library, printed out and put it all together at the end of last year. You may have seen this in one of my previous videos, and I am really happy of how this turned out. This book was first published in 2007 after the second Railway series hiatus, and this is a home print from 2024 of the original copy. And the 42nd and final book, we did the same thing. The colouring does seem a bit off here, but it's fine. This is a 2025 home print of the original copy of the book from 2011. And that was the final book in the Railway series. This book was written to celebrate 100 years of the birth of Wilbert Awdry. I really like this. The book started out with Wilbert writing to Christopher, and they end with Christopher writing about Wilbert. This could have been a much grander finale, but what we got was just okay. There are also some Miscellaneous Railway series books, which were illustrated by Clive Spong. Here is Thomas's Christmas Party from 1984. This is the oldest Railway series book that I own. This book exists because the TV crew wanted to make a Christmas episode of the TV show, but they could only use Wilbert's writing to adapt, and as they never made a proper Christmas story, they dragged him out of retirement to make this. Next up is Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree. Same story here, but the crew can now use Christopher's writing, and this was first published in 1986, and this is the 1988 paperback edition. Next is Thomas and the Evil Diesel from 1987, giving Diesel a proper redemption story. And lastly is Thomas and the Hurricane from 1992. It's quite hard to get a copy of the original illustrations for this one. And this and Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree were actually re-illustrated by Robin Davis, who did my first Thomas style illustrations, but I was able to get the originals. And just what I probably mentioned, this book isn't actually illustrated by Clive Spong, it's actually illustrated by Stephen Lings, who illustrated the book in the style of Clive Spong. It looks fairly convincing. There were some other miscellaneous books, but these were the only four that gave us actually original story, and the only four that I would consider canon. Lastly, a few little extras: the 2007 reprint of Gordon the Big Engine, which was my first ever Railway series book, as well as my extra copies of Mountain Engines and Oliver the Western Engine, which for some reason has a bit of sun fading, but it doesn't really matter because I've got another one. These are both, again, the 2002 reprints, exactly the same as the ones in my box set. And finally is the Thomas the Tank Engine story collection. This isn't a complete series book, it's just a book with a bunch of stories from Wilbert's books about engines 1 to 7. And that is my entire Railway series collection. This series really means a lot to me. If Wilbert never published the 3 Railway engines 80 years ago, then none of this or the show would exist. I don't even know where my life would be. If Wilbert Awdry was still alive, there would be a lot of things I'd want to ask him, but if there was one thing I could say to him, and that would be thank you.